Imagine waking up tomorrow and being told that your quiet, kind of medium-sized coastal town is going to become the capital of the world.
Right. It sounds like an absolute joke.
Yeah, and you have exactly 6 years to build all the palaces, the walls, the forums, and, the infrastructure to feed and hydrate hundreds of thousands of people.
Which is just a logistical impossibility.
Completely. I mean, in the modern world, getting the environmental reviews and the zoning permits alone would take a decade.
Oh, easily a decade.
But in the year 324 CE, Emperor Constantine basically looked at a map, pointed to a town called Byzantium, and actually pulled this off.
He really did. To take a relatively standard settlement and just turn it into a global superpower hub in less than a decade, it defies almost every rule of urban development.
It's wild. Well, welcome to the deep dive. You sent us this massive stack of your sources today, and I mean a real stack.
Yeah, there's a lot of material to get through.
Definitely. We've got everything from incredibly dense hydrological engineering papers on ancient aqueducts to architectural analyses of shifting skylines.
And the actual historical chronicles, too, written by the people who walk those streets.
Right. So our mission today is to sift through all of this and show you how a vulnerable Greek town became this impregnable new Rome.
And we are going to do it without getting bogged down in boring blueprints or endless, administrative details.
Yeah, exactly. We want to focus on the general timeline of how it was built, the sheer ingenuity, and honestly, the audacity of the builders.
Which is exactly what this material demands, I think.
Okay.
The creation of Constantinople wasn't just some standard construction project. It was a masterclass in aggressive, rapid-fire problem solving.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We have to start with the big move. It's 324 CE, and Emperor Constantine makes this monumentally disruptive decision.
A huge pivot.
Right, because Rome has been the capital for over 1,000 years. It is the center of the universe. Why on earth do you pack up the empire and move it almost 1,000 miles east?
Because the center of the universe had essentially become a trap.
A trap.
Yeah, it comes down to this mix of acute strategic necessity and just political frustration. Rome had an incredible legacy, obviously, but practically speaking, it was physically too far from the frontier.
Right, where the actual threats were.
Exactly. The existential threats were the massive armies massing along the Danube River to the north and the Euphrates River to the east.
And if you're an emperor, you can't afford like a month-long delay in communication.
No, you need to be where your troops are.
Plus, reading through these historical chronicles you provided, it really sounds like Rome was crawling with political baggage.
Oh, absolutely. It had become a playground for disaffected politicians. The Senate was deeply entrenched in centuries of tradition and self-interest.
So Constantine just wanted a clean slate.
Yeah, and when he looked at Byzantium, he saw a site that was geographically flawless. It sits right on the Bosporus Strait.
Literally the bridge between Europe and Asia.
Right. It offered unparalleled access for trade, deep water ports for the Navy, and swift troop movement. It was the perfect blank canvas.
But I keep getting hung up on the timeline. 6 years.
6 years.
They consecrated the new city, Constantinople, on May 11th, 330 CE. Wait, I just need to stop you there because the logistics don't make sense to me.
They are pretty staggering.
You can't quarry that much stone, carve that many statues, and build that many massive public squares in 6 years. How do you physically build a metropolis of that scale that fast in the ancient world?
Well, you don't build it from scratch. You appropriate it.
Okay, what does that mean?
The sources detail this incredibly aggressive, empire-wide recycling program, essentially. The necessary materials were sourced wholesale from the rest of the empire.
So they just took them.
Pretty much, they stripped temples and public buildings across Greece and Asia Minor of their columns, their marble facades, their artwork.
It's like an extreme makeover, imperial edition.
Exactly.
You just drive over to the neighboring province, rip the doors and the 50-ton monolithic marble columns off their temples, and use them to furnish your new living room.
That is basically what they did.
Yeah. But practically, how do you transport a 50-ton piece of marble across the Mediterranean without just, sinking your fleet?
That is where the Roman engineering apparatus really shines. They used specialized transport ships called lapidariae naves.
Stone ships.
Literally stone ships, yeah. These were massively reinforced, deep-hulled vessels designed specifically to carry immense concentrated weight.
Wow.
And they would sail them right up to the deep water ports of the new city, use these complex wooden cranes powered by human tread wheels, and just haul these pre-carved masterpieces directly onto the construction sites.
That is wild.
Yeah, they ornamented the main colonnaded avenue, which was called the Maze, with some of the greatest works of Greek and Roman art in months rather than the decades it would normally take to carve them.
Incredible.
But what's fascinating here is Constantine wasn't just stealing rocks to save time. He was stealing legitimacy.
Oh, tying it to the old empire.
Yes. He used this appropriated art to physically anchor his new city to ancient myths. For instance, local tradition held that Constantine took the legendary Palladium from Rome.
Remind me, that's the statue.
Right, the sacred mythic wooden statue of Athena that was said to protect whatever city held it. And he reportedly buried it directly underneath his own towering porphyry column, right in the center of his new forum.
So he literally planted the magic of old Rome into the dirt of new Rome and stood his own statue on top of it.
Exactly.
That is a psychological power move if I've ever heard one. But okay, setting up the buildings is one thing. You have hundreds of thousands of people migrating to this instant city. How do you feed them?
That was a massive undertaking.
I know he implemented a free food distribution system, doling out like 80,000 rations a day from 117 distribution points. But again, where is all that food coming from?
It came from the Annona, which was the massive state-run grain fleet. Since Constantinople didn't have the agricultural hinterland to support that kind of population, they completely redirected the grain supply of Egypt.
The whole supply.
A huge portion of it. Massive fleets of freighters sailed from Alexandria directly to the new capital. Once it arrived, it was stored in gargantuan fortified granaries along the harbor to protect it from rot and rats, before being processed in state-controlled bakeries.
So the city is built, the people are fed. But reading through these hydrological papers you sent, that massive population boom instantly triggered a catastrophic geographical reality.
That did.
You have 1 million people eventually, but a glaring flaw in the urban design. They had almost no drinking water.
Right. They had a few small, localized springs, but nothing that could sustain a capital city of that density. And, well, a city without water is a city that falls in a week.
Absolutely.
If they were going to survive, they had to engineer a solution on a scale never seen before, which meant aqueducts.
And these aqueducts completely blow my mind. We're talking about a system built in phases during the 4th and 5th centuries that makes modern infrastructure look lazy.
It really puts it to shame.
The engineers constructed this system of masonry channels that wound through the hills of Thrace, stretching over 400 kilometers. And some of your sources suggest if the parallel lines ran all the way to the city, it could have been up to 565 kilometers. The scale is very difficult to comprehend, but the precision is what's truly staggering to me.
Right, let's pause on the physics of that. Over 400 kilometers, operating entirely on gravity.
Entirely.
The papers note the gradient of this entire system was well below 0.1%.
Which is microscopic.
I equate this to dropping a marble on a track and having it roll perfectly for hundreds of miles using nothing but a nearly invisible continuous slope. How did ancient surveyors maintain that without, lasers or GPS?
Well, they used an instrument called a chorobates.
Chorobates?
Yeah, it was essentially a long wooden bench with plumb bobs hanging off the sides and a water channel carved into the top.
Oh, like a giant spirit level. Exactly like a giant spirit level. By ensuring the water in the channel sat perfectly level, they could sight along the top to establish an impeccably precise horizontal line across the landscape.
That's so clever.
Because a drop that is too steep and the water pressure builds up and destroys the masonry. Too shallow and the water stagnates and becomes toxic.
Right.
So they maintained that microscopic gradient across valleys using aqueduct bridges and through mountains using hand-chiseled tunnels.
Okay, so they get the water to the city. But if a drought hits or an enemy army shows up and just smashes the aqueduct outside the city walls, you die of thirst.
Which was a constant threat.
So they had to store it. Which brings us to the cisterns. The city built a vast network of massive open and closed underground reservoirs. But why did they build them so differently from the old Roman style?
It was a necessary adaptation. Old Rome relied heavily on a specific type of super strong concrete, which required a volcanic ash called pozzolana mined near Mount Vesuvius.
And Constantinople didn't have that.
Right, they didn't have a local supply of that ash. Plus, they were in a highly active earthquake zone, rigid concrete cracks under seismic stress.
Oh, so you would just shatter.
Exactly. So they shifted their methods. They used brick vaults and supporting columns instead of solid cement piers. Brick and mortar flex and absorb the shock waves of an earthquake much better than rigid concrete.
which inadvertently created these gorgeous, cavernous underground spaces. And there was a detail in your sources about this that is so surreal.
The Yerbatana Surrey.
Yes. Emperor Justinian built this enormous 6th century underground pillared cistern. It was a marvel, but as the centuries passed, the city literally forgot it was there.
It was completely lost to urban memory, built over and just forgotten.
Until 1545, a traveler named Petrus Gillius is exploring the city, and he notices something bizarre.
I love this story.
The locals in this one specific neighborhood are just casually lowering buckets through holes in their floorboards to draw up fresh water.
Like it's totally normal.
And not just water. Some of them are actively catching fish through the floors of their living rooms.
Just fishing in the living room.
Right. So he investigates and rediscovers this massive, ancient subterranean lake right under their feet, held up by hundreds of recycled marble columns.
It perfectly illustrates how the layers of this city literally built up over the centuries. But, having water and food only solves the internal problems. As our timeline progresses into the early 5th century, during the reign of Emperor Theodosius II, the city faces a crisis from the outside.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The population had completely burst out of Constantine's original walls. They had outgrown their armor, essentially.
They were very exposed.
And to make matters worse, the unthinkable is happening in the West. Old Rome is actively falling to invaders.
The psychological shock of Rome falling really cannot be overstated. Constantinople realized it was entirely vulnerable. They needed a new perimeter, and they needed it immediately.
And the mastermind behind this was a Praetorian prefect named Anthemius.
Yes, around 413 CE, he initiated the construction of a new set of walls about 1.5 kilometers west of the old ones.
And these evolved into the legendary Theodosian walls. But calling it a wall is honestly an understatement. It was a 3-layer meat grinder.
That is a very accurate description.
I need you to explain exactly how this worked physically, because it wasn't just a tall barrier.
No, it was a system of compounded lethal zones. First, an invading army hit a moat 20 meters wide and 7 meters deep.
So that prevents them from rolling massive siege towers up to the walls.
Exactly. You can't cross that easily. And if an invading force managed to cross the moat, they were trapped on a raised terrace facing a low outer wall.
Oh.
This outer wall was specifically designed to disrupt battering rams. If they somehow scaled that outer wall, they were now trapped in an elevated kill zone between the outer wall and the massive inner wall.
And the inner wall was huge.
5 meters thick, 10 meters high, and punctuated by 192 defensive towers.
So they're trapped in a trench, taking crossfire from archers on the inner towers, while totally unable to maneuver.
It was a flawless defense.
But maintaining a 6-kilometer fortress requires constant upkeep. And in 447 CE, a massive earthquake devastated parts of the walls right when Attila the Hun was marching toward the city.
Worst possible timing.
How do you mobilize enough labor to fix a disaster like that in just a few weeks?
Well, you don't use professional masons alone. You crowdsource the labor. And the government tapped into the most organized, passionate, and volatile groups in the city, the chariot racing factions from the Hippodrome.
This is my absolute favorite detail in the entire deep dive. In Constantinople, the center of public life was chariot racing.
It was everything to them.
And the fans were divided into massive, fanatical rival factions, the most powerful being the Blues and the Greens. Imagine the most hardcore, die-hard sports ultras, right?
Absolutely.
Groups that normally riot in the streets, burn down neighborhoods, and violently hate each other.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the government did something brilliant here. They weaponized civic rivalry. Instead of letting the Blues and Greens fight each other in the streets while Attila approached, they challenged them to compete to rebuild the walls.
They channeled the raw, destructive energy of sports hooligans into the ultimate act of civic survival.
It is incredible.
The sources record that these factions provided 16,000 men. The Blues took one section, the Greens took another, and they rebuilt the damaged towers in less than 2 months.
And Attila arrived, took one look at the restored fortifications, and just turned around.
It was a triumph of social engineering as much as physical engineering.
Without a doubt. And because those walls held, the city inside was safe. They didn't have to worry about being sacked every summer.
Right.
And that unparalleled security triggered a profound shift inside the city.
Yeah, they had the breathing room to look inward and upward. As we move into the 6th through 9th centuries, the whole look and feel of the city transforms. The architectural language shifts from traditional Roman to uniquely Byzantine. Why the sudden obsession with complex brickwork and massive domes?
It reflects a deep theological and cultural shift. Traditional Roman architecture, like the long rectangular basilica, was designed for civic gatherings, law courts, and public business.
Very functional.
Right, the focus was horizontal. But as the Byzantine culture became deeply intertwined with Orthodox Christianity, the architecture needed to reflect the cosmos.
Uh,
They wanted interior spaces that felt like heaven on earth. A dome represents the vault of heaven, drawing the eye and the soul upward.
but the physics of a dome are a nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you put a massive, heavy, round dome on top of a square room without the whole thing collapsing inward?
That was the defining breakthrough of Byzantine architecture. It's called the pendentive.
Pendentive.
Yeah, a pendentive is a curved, triangular vault that bridges the gap between the circular base of the dome and the square corners of the room below.
Oh, so it smooths out the transition.
Exactly. It seamlessly distributes the immense outward pushing weight of the dome down into four massive corner piers. It allowed them to build larger, higher, and more seemingly weightless domes than the Romans ever could.
And the undisputed king of this era was Emperor Justinian in the mid-6th century. Aside from the famous Hagia Sophia, he completely rebuilt the Church of the Holy Apostles. He altered its geometry entirely, building it in a massive cruciform, or a cross shape, with 5 separate domes.
Just showing off, really.
But the architectural evolution wasn't just happening in the churches, it was happening in the secular world too, specifically the Great Palace.
Oh, the Great Palace wasn't just one building. It was this sprawling, chaotic complex of gardens, audience halls, and pavilions that had been added to for centuries.
Right.
By the 9th century, Emperor Theophilus decides it's time for a lavish restoration. But he doesn't just build with marble, he builds with automation.
Yes. He installs what might be the greatest piece of imperial tech in history. Theophilus hires a brilliant engineer named Leo the mathematician to outfit his throne room.
It is so theatrical.
When foreign ambassadors would enter, they wouldn't just see a king, they would see golden trees filled with mechanical birds that actually sang.
Right.
They would see massive golden lions flanking the throne. They would mechanically beat their tails on the ground and roar. And then, the showstopper.
The levitating throne.
The ambassador would be instructed to bow face down on the floor. While their eyes were on the marble, the mechanics would engage. When they looked up, the throne had suddenly levitated, lifting the emperor high up to the ceiling, dressed in entirely different, more dazzling robes.
It sounds like magic.
Wait, so the emperor basically had an ancient hydraulic elevator just to mess with foreign diplomats?
He absolutely did, and it wasn't a party trick, it was statecraft. The Byzantines understood that architecture and technology could be actively weaponized as tools of psychological warfare.
Oh, for sure.
Think about it. You are an ambassador from a kingdom that lives in wooden halls. You walk into a room where metal lions roar and the ruler literally ascends toward heaven before your eyes.
You're terrified.
You are meant to feel awe, confusion, and ultimate subservience. The city itself, its impenetrable walls, its soaring, heaven-touching domes, its levitating thrones, was meticulously designed to project an image of divine, untouchable authority.
And for over 1,000 years, it worked. The Avars attack, the Persians attack, the Arabs lay siege twice, the Russians attack, and every single time the 3-layer meat grinder of the Theodosian walls swats them away. The city endures.
But no wall lasts forever.
No.
The rules of war eventually changed.
The year is 1453 CE. After 11 centuries, the ultimate defensive system meets the ultimate offensive paradigm shift: gunpowder.
Yeah, Mehmed the Conqueror arrives with the Ottoman army, but more importantly, he brings massive cannons, known as bombards.
And those walls just weren't ready for that.
The walls designed by Anthemius back in the 5th century were a masterpiece, but they were built to withstand the kinetic impact of battering rams and catapults throwing rocks.
Right. Ancient siege weapons.
They were never designed to absorb the explosive kinetic energy of massive stone cannonballs fired at high velocity. The bombardment lasted for weeks, slowly and methodically pounding the unbreakable, earthquake-proof brick and stone into rubble. In 1453, the walls were finally breached and the Byzantine Empire fell.
It's the end of an era.
It is. And this raises an important question, I think. What happens to a city's architectural legacy when its walls finally fall? Does it just vanish into the history books?
So what does this all mean? The empire is gone, the city is conquered. But here's the final provocative twist that we pulled from your sources. The walls of Constantinople actually went viral.
It's true, the physical walls in the east were breached, but their design had already escaped to the west.
Over the centuries, long before the city fell, countless Western European kings, knights, and crusaders passed through Constantinople.
And they took notes.
They sailed up to the city, and the very first thing they saw was this awe-inspiring, terraced, three-layer wall with those striking alternating bands of red brick and white stone and massive polygonal towers. One of those visitors was King Edward I of England.
Edward was profoundly impacted by the scale and the majesty of what he saw. He recognized that this was the absolute pinnacle of military architecture, both in function and in psychological intimidation.
He was so obsessed with it that when he returned home and set about conquering Wales, he deliberately instructed his architects to mimic Constantinople.
That's amazing.
If you look at Caernarfon Castle in Wales today, it doesn't look like a standard square English keep. Edward specifically demanded color-banded masonry and sweeping polygonal towers to directly copy the Theodosian walls.
He wanted that legitimacy.
Exactly. He wanted to channel the ancient majesty of the Roman Empire to legitimize his own rule over the Welsh.
It is a remarkable testament to the enduring power of design. The Roman Empire may have officially ended in 1453, but its skyline didn't die. It echoed outward, physically shaping the stone castles of medieval Europe.
Which brings us right back to where we started. Building a city today takes forever. But the city Constantine built in just 6 short years. The massive aqueducts leveled by hand-carved wooden tools. The walls they crowdsourced from violent sports fans.
And unparalleled.
That frantic, audacious 6-year sprint created a legacy that protected an empire for a millennium and left blueprints that are literally stamped into the Welsh countryside today.
Truly incredible.
We want to thank you for sending in these amazing sources and joining us on this deep dive. Next time you see a brick wall, a vaulted ceiling, or a domed roof, then take a second look at the engineering holding it up. You might just be looking at the ghost of the Roman Empire staring back at you. Keep exploring.